today we are talking about your target market. When you understand who you are selling to, you are better able to market to them. A specific group of people that have a common traits is called a target market. You may have one target market or you may have many. What you are selling will likely be able to be used by many different people. However, what you are doing here is identifying the demographic, the target market that best fits who is an ideal customer. That doesn't mean you can't sell or others can't or won't be interested, but the more you focus on who your target market is, the more successful you will be. Okay, try to limit your number of target markets to 1 or 2, 3 max. Okay, unless you're a really big business, you want to do 1 or 2, and I would say, for many of you, as I know some of you, what you're up to in what you're doing, you really have. You can really focus in on who is the best for your market. Mike, yours is fairly apparent that you've got a small group of customers. Steve, are you focused on music lessons with this?
Yeah, music, and then we have the art side of it as well.
Okay, so just focusing if in the music lessons that you provide, if you're just focusing on that, you're kind of thinking about parents.
Mm-hmm. But right? Trevor, while I have a small group, I'm doing this to have a bigger group.
True.
So
true, but when I'm.
But you're right. It's a very narrow scope of ex-MBA students. Yeah.
Yes. So you're able to do that really well. And the question is, can you narrow your target market down even more specifically than just right. ex-MBA students?
Yeah.
Okay. So that kind of a thing. Wayne, for what you're up to, although anybody could use it, this is what you're targeting is not targeted at people who are in their 70s and 80s, right? So I'm trying to throw out a few things here to get you folks thinking. This is really important for you to get to. The more you can target it, the more you can speak to exactly what these people are looking for. And again, other people will read themselves into it, but you need to try and do it. Now, there's a bunch of questions here that we're going to be asking in each section. If you don't know for sure, it's okay. Take an educated guess, or there are going to be some things that we're going to be going through here today that aren't really relevant to you. Like for me, there's a few of these when I'm doing it for a target market. Sometimes I'm like, that doesn't matter to me. That might be 1 or 2 of these things. Okay, but again, try and give an educated guess because you want to be able to do it. So the first one here, identify your target market using, age, sex, geographic location, the role title. So a role could be a role in business, a role could be a role in the community or in the family. Age may or may not be relevant to you. Is sex relevant to you? For example, is when we're talking parents and music lessons, is it more the wife who does it rather than the husband? And does that matter? Racial and cultural. We live in a world where we're not supposed to say that there's racial and cultural differences, but I have a client who is a Jewish realtor, and let me tell you, he is selling to a lot to investors, and a big portion of the market is either Middle Eastern or Chinese. So for him to ignore that would be foolish for him. Okay. Income level, political affiliation, and there could be a host of other factors. So start to just kind of jot down some things, and you've got a minute. I'm assuming most of you are kind of thinking away as I'm talking here. This is good. I appreciate that you're giving some information there. We're going to move on. We're going to keep going here. So the next one is, what do they read or how do they consume information? And also, who are they influenced by? When you're talking, so are they reading? Are they watching videos? Are they listening to podcasts? If they're doing any of those, and this is relevant for you, think about writing those down. Maybe they're, and it was interesting as I was writing this out, are they doing it on a computer or a smartphone? And then I wrote as an afterthought, newspaper, TV, and radio. So life has certainly changed in the last 10 years in relation to how we consume information. Again, not all of you will be able to identify something here that's relevant, but if you can, this can be very valuable for you. Next one, where do they get recommendations from? And first of all, think about it in this way. If you were going to go buy a car, who would you talk to? Would you ask for a recommendation from somebody? Or where would you go to get your information? Would you go on social media? Would you ask your parents, kids? Would you go to review sites? Would you go to Consumer Reports? I'm not, Consumer Reports used to be the place that people went to all the time. I'm actually not sure if Consumer Reports is relevant anymore, although I'm not sure it's not.
LinkedIn's a big one for business.
Yes.
LinkedIn is huge, Trevor, for anybody in the business world right now.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll make a side comment for you on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, from an advertising perspective, is not always usually has very poor results from anybody I know in the industry, and that's because often when people are on LinkedIn, they go with a specific purpose. They do it different. They interact with it differently than they do with Facebook, because with Facebook they go there when they're bored. They go to LinkedIn when they have a job to do, when they're actually searching for a job or looking for somebody, or they're looking for something specific. Okay.
Thanks.
What problems and desires do they have? Problems or desires do they have? Okay. So if your product doesn't solve a problem that they have, then it's less likely to be something that they're going to buy. And you want to identify that problem. So, Steve, I'm going to pick on you again. Music lessons. What's the problem? I've got a kid, and it could be a desire. I want them to be, the next whoever, or I want them to be great at playing a piano. Or it could be I have a problem and I think that they don't have, they're not very disciplined, and the music teacher is going to give them the discipline as they teach them. Or they're going to, the kid wants to play something, but they have no idea that's how to do it, and they can't teach them. That's another problem. So as you're thinking about those may be things that are worth noting. Okay. Problems and desires. Okay. Are there any needs? So I say a primary need. Is it a requirement that you fulfill for them? And again, there's a question about what's a real need and a real want. But Mike, in order, for these ex-MBA folks, if they don't get your service, how are they going to get to where they want to in their careers? So that's a need that they have identified. A slightly different way of asking the same question. Okay. How do you fulfill their needs? Okay, so you've identified what they need or what their problem is. How are you going to fulfill that? Okay, next we're going to get on to talking about fear, because everybody has fears, and there's going to be two different ways we talk about it. The first one is, what are they afraid of in their business or in their life? You know, if you've got a business, are you afraid of a lack of growth or too much growth? Are you afraid of the impact if they make a decision? Like, if I choose to buy something, are you afraid of how that's going to impact you? Or maybe you're afraid of the impact if you don't buy something. You've got a problem, you need to solve it. What's going to happen if you don't solve it? What about what other people think of you? You know, are you afraid of that? And in a business context, that can be very relevant. And in a personal context, it can be relevant too. You know, you might say it's kind of silly that you might be concerned about what your neighbors think of you or your friends think of you, but you might be afraid of what your wife thinks about you if you don't do something or if you do something. So think about those fears in business and in life. Okay, next one is, what fears do they have about buying what you have? You know, are they afraid that it's not a good deal? Are they afraid that it's going to take a long time to buy or implement? You know, especially if you're talking to, if you're, I used to sell software. And even in my business where I'm selling web design and digital marketing, people are afraid of the amount of time it's going to be required for them to invest in order to get it done and get what they need. Or maybe they're just afraid of the whole unknown. Maybe they had a bad past experience buying from you or someone like you, or buying a product like what you have. They could be afraid that you're lying, or maybe they're afraid that they're going to get pressure. And I think that kind of tends more from my sales background, but that can also be relevant in the online market today. If I sign up for some information, are you going to spam me with another 10 emails over the next 2 days? Okay. We next have a piece here for the target market 2. We're not going to go there. You can do the target market 2. But what I'd like to do is I'd just like to take a pause here. Folks, is there anything that you would like to share about something that was interesting about what you found about as you thought about your target market?
I like the insight that they have fears, and you have to address those fears if they're going to engage what you have.
My question, Trevor, do you have to, following up on Wayne's question, their fears, so you have to address that. But in all of the, if there are 5 or 6 concerns that they may have, your website has to address every single one, right? It can't just address the main ones, or it has to address, I want a short and sweet website. I don't want a therapy session for all of the XMBAs.
Well, what you need, that's a very interesting question. What you need to do is you need to answer enough of those fears in order for them to take the next step.
Yeah.
You addressing all of those fears doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to take the next step because you solved all of them
I see.
or addressed all of them. In some cases, I would say that giving too much information sometimes can open up other thought streams which bring other questions to mind. So you need to be wise about how you're doing them. The fact that you're getting these fears down on here enables you to make the decision about what you're going to do with them. Am I going to address them or not?
Okay, thanks.
Comment from anyone else, or should we keep going here? Okay. So we have a second target market. Again, not all of you are going to need to fill out a second target market, and some of you may want to have a third target market. Okay. Name the 3 most important things your prospect needs to know in order to make a decision. Okay. This is related to some of the things above. I've given some ideas here. 1, they need to know that it works. 1, what you're selling them has what they need. It solves the problem. It's a good value. It's easy to use. It's easy to install. You know, probably the best example I can give, although they're much better at it now, is IKEA. As used to be, people used to talk about how you'd buy something from IKEA and it would take forever to put it together. IKEA is doing that better now, and that's what we want to be able to do, is help people understand that it's easy to use or install or purchase. The buying process, not just the implementation, the buying process itself needs to be easy. Do I trust you? Or do I trust your company? Or do I trust your product? Will my wife approve, or my VP approve, or, you know, whoever? Will somebody else approve of this? And that's not always something you have to address, but it's for some things you do. If it's buying a house, and if I was buying a house, and since I'm married, my wife better well approve of the house that I buy. Will it prevent me from getting something else that I really want? Can I get it tomorrow, or do I have to buy it today? And that's something the more you can provide an urgency, and you see it all the time. You know, we have sales. There's only so many left. If you go to any website to book a vacation or to book a hotel room, they tell you there's only so many left. Now, the problem is we don't know whether that's real or made up. So you need to think about doing things like that. Is there anything you can do to increase the urgency, so I actually choose to do it? Because if I procrastinate, chances of me doing it are pretty slim. And then the final one, and the tricky one, is, can I justify it to myself? There's a theory out there in persuasion that says that whenever you decide to make a decision, you make the decision actually emotionally, and you justify it logically. So whether you believe that's true or not, whether it's emotional or whether it's logical, part of what you're doing needs to be able to help people to justify it logically. And again, I think getting back to Mike's point is that don't try and overthink this and put down an essay of everything on this. but provide enough information. And the question is, what's enough information? And that's your job to do. Okay. So your value. What promise do you or can you make? My company says we guarantee our website design. If you don't love it, you get your money back. So do you have a money back guarantee? You don't have to have one. It's just something there that you need to consider. You'll love it. It's better than something else. That's a promise. Maybe that you have more choice, or that you have the best price, or the best quality, or it's the longest lasting, or it's the easiest to buy. There's all sorts of different things this could be. Are there promises that you can make? Now, the next thing that follows that up with, and is, what proof do you have? Okay. Do you have a testimonial? Do you have a case study? Perhaps what are other customers saying? Or who are other customers that you're selling to? Or maybe it's the number of customers. The other customers might be, you have a bunch of logos of other customers if you're selling business to business. What's the education or the experience of your team? Steve, for you, that's probably pretty relevant. Mike, that's probably pretty relevant for you. Although Jeremy, I'm not sure that's quite as relevant for you, your education and your experience. Okay. Examples of your work. So in my business, and Glenn, in yours with your custom furniture, showing examples of your work is really important. Your process can be part of your proof. When I talk to people about what my company does, is we talk about how we do project management. And we do project management because what happens is, if you don't project manage it, the project never finishes. It can go on and on and on. But having a project management, a regular weekly meeting, means that everything moves forward in a somewhat orderly manner. Maybe you price match your social proof. So a little different than testimonials. You're showing directly how people on LinkedIn or Facebook or Google My Business are talking about you. Maybe what you have is long lasting. Any press coverage, if anybody's ever covered you in the news, being able to showcase that is important. Are there any research studies that are relevant to what you have? Jeremy, Wayne, but there might be some things there that you folks can talk about. In some cases, it's images or video about a product, although it could be it could be about a service that's being explained on video or via images. Okay, lots of things to think about there. Now, my company is called The Story Web Design and Marketing. My the background behind the name of my company is that I once heard somebody say that a website every website tells a story. The question is, what story is it telling? So when I started this business, my focus was on that a really crappy looking website told a story that most people don't want to tell. So we actually created good looking websites to tell a good story. So that's actually something you want to do if you want to have a professional presentation or perception of your brand, of your organization. You want to have an attractive website. But the next thing that follows on in relation to that is do you have a story behind who you are, how your company started, how you provided your product or your service? What story can you tell? Jeremy, I think that's probably fairly relevant for you. Stories, lots and lots of stories. And actually, Glenn, I think that's probably pretty relevant for you, for your furniture, is the story behind somebody who had an idea and you were able to help shape that and provide them just what they want. Those are stories. And a story doesn't have to be long. A story can be even one sentence long. Okay. So now we're going to get into the SWOT analysis. Okay, what are your strengths? What does your company do well? Okay, there are a ton of questions here that you can start to ask. What I want to do is, just from a timing perspective, we got about 2 minutes left. So I want to basically just run through and say, please go through and do these if you're able to. I've given you a lot of questions to work from here. So take 10 minutes, grab that, and then start to talk about, if you have peers or competitors, how are you different from them? And I'm smiling because I'm just thinking about each of you here. By the way, I know tomorrow, Heather, I'm going to pick on you and I'm going to ask you to tell me what you're doing, because I know what everybody else is up to on here. But Heather, I don't know what you're up to. Okay. So how are you different than your competitors and peers? Answer these questions. And tomorrow we're going to start to just relax a little bit. We're going to talk about web design. I'm going to show you some pretty pictures or pretty websites. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So is there any questions that I need to answer from you folks before I sign off today? Okay.
One thing I'm trying to discern here is yesterday focused particularly on the main landing page. Some of these questions, I'm assuming you're answering a lot of these questions on every subsequent page, not necessarily methodically, but you're answering some of these things in each dialogue on each of the pages that are presented on the website. Is that correct?
Well, Jeremy, yesterday what I did was I started to get you to think about what's going to be on your homepage or your landing page. And we're going to get back to that tomorrow. But I did that to just kind of get your mind thinking, get you feeling like we're actually heading towards something about the landing page before I got into the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty of all this information. So you can start to think about, when you were thinking about the content on your homepage, now you've thought about some of these things. Hopefully what you're thinking is like going, oh, well, you know what, that isn't quite good enough, or I need to add this, that, and the other. So we're going to go back and we're going to be talking about the homepage again tomorrow. So that's a perfect